Hi everyone, this is Isaac Steincamp from the Chess Summit Network, and today I want to present a short video on a concept that I don't feel like is talked about enough, which is playing against an unrated player. And I hear the concerns about playing unrated players mostly at the scholastic level, but I feel like a couple times it does arise in a tournament where you are paired against someone who is unrated and never having played a tournament game before. And that was the case this past weekend when I played in the Pennsylvania State Chess Championships. I was paired with someone who was unrated, and being in the open section, the lowest rated guy in my section I'd say was like 1500. So, you know, I didn't really know what to expect from this unrated opponent. Maybe he didn't know anything about chess and assumed that by playing in the championship section, maybe he'd have a chance for playing for first, or maybe he had been secretly training, and maybe he had the knowledge of a 2100 rated chess player. And so, when it says unrated, it's definitely an uncomfortable position, but you really can't take skill into account. You kind of have to treat it like you'd be playing anybody else, just focus on playing your best game. But at the same time, when you're playing someone who's unrated, you also know that they are probably not a grandmaster. I mean, if they were a grandmaster, they would have probably been playing chess for a long time. So this is probably not the case, Probably you just want to assume like they've been playing in some foreign country, they have a FIDE rating or something, and they just haven't come to the U.S. yet. My opponent was a player from Carnegie Mellon University, so I knew that he was obviously a pretty sharp individual, and I was given the white pieces in the first round of the Pennsylvania State Chess Championships. So here we go. I always start out with c4, so I played the English, and my goal in the opening is to try to get a position where I'm really comfortable. And if I can choose an opening that I'm comfortable with, my opponent probably is unfamiliar with, and that's probably something worth considering. But there's no reason to try to go out of my own theory to try to confuse someone who I don't even know how good they are. So my opponent caught me off guard by playing f5, and here, the Dutch is an opening that you have to study theory. You have to know what you're doing, and so when you played this move, I just went ahead and assumed, okay, this guy, probably, let's just assume he's my level, and I have to throw everything I have at him to be able to get a result. So he played the move f5, and I figured, okay, the most flexible setup for me is knight to f3. He plays knight to f6. Okay, he could play g6, he could play e6, he could also play d6. I don't know, so I just continue just waiting to see what he does. So I played g3, and he plays the move e6. So it doesn't matter if you're playing an unrated opponent or not. Whenever they play a Dutch and they play this move e6, that obviously alludes to the Stonewall structure, c6, d5, getting that strong hold in the center and being able to kind of just block you out. So, I'm thinking here, I'm like, okay, let's continue to make non-committal moves and just make moves that get me into a position where I'm comfortable with. So I just played bishop to g2, just filling in the hole. My opponent played d5, and for some weaker players, perhaps are worried about the threat of g takes c4, my pawn's hanging. But in reality, if my opponent takes on c4, now we're out of a stonewall. I can just play queen a4 check, queen takes c4, and the pawns on e6 and f5 block in the c8 bishop, and it becomes really hard for black to get any concrete play. Meanwhile, he can't really push for the e5 square because I can play d4, bishop to f4, and put a piece on e5. So I pretty much get to play as if I'm playing against a stonewall, whereas my opponent really can't play for the e4 square. So I was more than comfortable castling, and here my opponent played c6. And now we've kind of reached this position where I have to make a decision. Do I want to play the move d3 or do I want to play the move d4? So I'm familiar with both structures, so I could have very easily gone with d4, I could have very easily gone with d3, and there are some other moves that I could have played as well. But in this position, what was I thinking? Well, I want to get a position where my over-the-board tournament experience can provide some sort of an edge without overextending my bounds. So, for example, playing a move that's completely out of my own understanding of chess, let's say, like, for example, b3, right? I've never played b3 against a stonewall in this position. And if I played this to throw my opponent out of book, well, I'm probably going to get in some sort of trouble, but, I know the theory for both this move d4 and d3. So now the question becomes, which move do I want to play on the board? Because, it doesn't, really matter for me. It's just a matter of what I feel like playing right now. And I figured, oh, okay, d4 is the most natural move. I can just kind of go against a typical stonewall structure, but let's be honest here. When you're playing against someone who's playing the stonewall, they're most comfortable with these positions because it starts with the move 1 d4, then f5. Just the stonewall can also be played against the English. So if I play this move d4, okay, I know what I'm doing, but I think my opponent knows what he's doing too. And I really wanted to challenge my opponent and see how much he knew. So I decided to go for a structure that I actually learned before learning the d4 structure against a stone, which is this d3 idea. And my idea behind playing d3 is that my opponent now has to worry about the potential of me playing e4. If I can pull in this e4 move, attacking both the d5 and the f5 pawns, black is strategically busted. So I thought that this move, I didn't really create any weaknesses. I know what's going on, but my opponent now has to show me that he also knows something too. So this is where over-the-board experience kind of trumps, let's just say, secret underground training, not playing USCF games. This is where that kind of trumps that idea, d3. So my opponent plays a move, bishop d6, a very natural move, but now I get to play this move, knight c3. Notice that now a move like d4 isn't possible because the queen is no longer protecting the d-pawn. Whereas like here, if I just played the move knight c3, d4 is something I probably want to worry about just a little bit. d4 followed by c5, and my position definitely gets boxed in. So okay, d3, bishop d6, now knight to c3. And my opponent plays knight bd7. So he's developing very naturally, but he hasn't exactly answered the threat of e4. So when I'm looking at the position, I want to consider, okay, how am I going to go about carrying out this plan? And I kind of realized, like, okay, let's make a waiting move. Queen to c2, rook to e1, or bishop to g5. It doesn't really matter. I'm not really testing black just yet. And let's just insert a nothing move for me. I don't know, a3. I do need to be a little bit worried about this move e5. And let's say after takes, black does have some control over the center. I mean, I think white is more than comfortable here. But why give black this play where he's now playing for e4 himself? It's not quite clear what e4 would do for me. It just feels like the structure that I had didn't really lend itself to anything. So, I thought a little bit more here. I was like, okay, I want to be testing, and I want to use the thematic ideas in the structure. Get me to a position where I'm familiar with it, and my opponent doesn't really have as much to work with. So I think I found the only move that does that, which was c takes d5. And my opponent already has to make a decision. Does he want to play e takes d5, or does he want to play c takes d5? And they both have their own unique disadvantages. Let's say for a moment my opponent plays e takes d5. Well, now I can play e4, and my goal is to bust open the e-file where my opponent's king is in the center. And the move that my opponent chose, which was c takes d5, it has its own weaknesses too. Yes, I can still play e4. It doesn't bust open the e-file, but now I can play this move knight b5. The reason why, if you go back to the Stonewall, the reason why black plays this move c6 is so then that way when bishop d6 is played, knight c3, knight b5 is not an option for white. And black has to keep this dark squared bishop, so he doesn't want to have to be in a position where he has to waste tempi moving it up and down the diagonal. So by getting this capture, I force black to concede something, and I kind of ask him, okay, what do you want to do? So he takes with the c-pawn, which is probably the best decision, but now I get to go forth with my plan, which is just to play this move e4. And this is a true pawn sacrifice, and I was waiting to see, what my opponent would do with it. Now, he does need to be careful. Let's say he takes for a second, right? I'll take back. And if he takes, well now, rather than moving my knight to g5, I can take his bishop in some lines. e6 is threatened. If he takes my knight, I can take with check, and I'm going to win the f3 pawn too. So now the center's blown open, my opponent can't castle. For example, the move queen e7, takes, rook to e1 check, king to f7, bishop takes f3. And if you do a pawn count, I'm just up a pawn. This is an endgame where, I'm more than comfortable playing, and I can play for 2 results, and, I'm satisfied. So, this was more than sufficient to me. So the bishop on d6 is a serious problem, and black would have to give up objectively his best piece in the Stonewall setup while completely destroying his own pawn structure. So I don't really think he could take here, so that kind of left black with his only choice, which is to castle. Okay, so now that my opponent's castled and hasn't really answered my threats, I need to continue kind of pushing through and proving that I have a superior position. And I kind of figured here, okay, well, black still has some weaknesses, right? This this d5 pawn rather, and this f5 pawn, they're both targeted by my e4 pawn. Maybe at the right moment I can put my queen on b3 and open up this long diagonal towards the king. But it would really be nice if I could push my pawn to e5. So what I thought about doing was to play, okay, well let's put some pressure on d5, then we'll put some pressure on the e-file, and to do that we really need to limit this knight. So I played the move bishop to g5, and the objective was, okay, now I'm threatening d5, so e takes d5, pawn takes d5, knight takes d5, and he can't take back because of the pin. So he made a simple move, queen to e8. Okay, well, Now what do I do? Well, I think I made the best move here, which was just rook to e1. And the idea is to fork the two pieces, so we'll see what black knows about tactics here. But also, I'm still putting pressure here on the e-file, kind of punishing black for putting his queen, I think, on the wrong square. I think it might have been more productive for black if he had just played the move queen to c7, but now this d5 pawn's seemingly weak. I can play queen to b3, and now the e6 pawn, is a liability, so this d pawn's kind of frozen. I like my position here as well. Also, knight to b5 can prove to be pretty annoying. So he chose queen to e8, which ran into rook e1, and then he moved his queen again to g6. And so now I'm continuing looking for ideas, and I kind of realized, well, okay, my bishop in g5 doesn't really have a home. Let's go ahead and eliminate the piece in f6. And the idea was that if knight takes f6, well, obviously I have this fork and the game is over. If rook takes f6, which is actually what my opponent had played, I still have this idea, e5, so he can't do this. And if my opponent chose queen takes f6, well, I thought I was reasonably happy with the position that I get here. I'll take. It doesn't matter which pawn I take. Well, actually it does, but I was going to take on d5 anyways. Knight takes, and if he takes on b2, material's equal, but just the center kind of feels really weak. A move like rook to e6 really punishes black for kind of letting his queen drift off on the wrong side of the board. And I can play a move like d4 if I want to, cover these two squares from my opponent's knight, really restrict his development. I thought that here I had more than enough compensation. Knight to e7 check is a threat in some lines. I was happy here, and I thought, honestly, my d3 pawn, while a weakness, wasn't as awkward as this f5 pawn, blocking in the bishop. So my assessment of this position is white is better. Now, my opponent, he had been under a lot of pressure the whole game, and he collapsed here with the move rook takes f6. And, obviously after e5, takes. My opponent played queen to e8. I played f4. So in this position, I'm up a piece, right? But again, we still don't really know how good my opponent is. Why give him any sort of tactical resource? Like, for example, he could play the move f4, which might be annoying. So I just went ahead and played f4, saying, okay, you can't play f4 now. How are you going to beat me? He played rook to h6. Well, his idea is obviously to maybe play queen to h5 at some point, try to threaten checkmate. That's fine. I'm going to continue to solidify my position. This move d4 blocks this long diagonal, and I have a really tenable position. I went on to win this game being up a piece, and I was actually able to convert it and go up a full rook before my opponent resigned. So I'll stop here for the sake of the analysis, but I thought that this game was fairly instructive because this idea of going over games against unrated players is something that's not really talked about at the higher levels, because I feel like it's really only an issue at the scholastic level. And I think the main takeaway is unrated players you should treat as if they are just as good as you. But your over-the-board experience and your diligence while calculating should be enough to be able to compensate and get some sort of point, whether it be a draw or a win. And this is been something that I'd struggled with. I would say a fair amount during my scholastic career. I'd be about 1,000. I'd play some unrated guy and say, oh look, he's some bozo, and I wind up losing because the guy's actually 1,100. Well, 1,100 is also not invincible. So this guy who I actually I played in the first round, he actually wound up going into the U1400 section, and he won the whole thing. So this guy, he's clearly a good chess player. So when you play an underrated player, just play your best. Don't try to be too tricky with your openings. Just play within your bounds. And just because I played aggressive in this game doesn't mean like you always have to play aggressive against unrated. It's just play what you're comfortable with playing, and if an opportunity presents itself, take it. So that being said, that's my video for this week, and I hope that you guys stay tuned for next week's videos. This is Isaac Steincamp signing off from the Chess Summit Network.